Adrian Cole wasn't the kind of man who ever had to settle. As a self-made millionaire, his evenings were filled with glamorous parties, five-star dinners, and beautiful women who wore diamonds as casually as perfume. But when a last-minute business gala threatened his carefully polished image, fate played a cruel trick. His date canceled. Every option, every model and socialite on speed dial suddenly disappeared. Adrian had no choice but to take the one woman he never imagined standing beside him. Lily Bennett, his sister's quiet, simple friend. Lily was nothing like the women who usually orbited Adrian's world. A schoolteacher with ink stains on her fingers and a wardrobe made of soft cotton instead of silk, she lived in the shadows of simplicity. To Adrian, she had always been forgettable. Sweet, polite, and plain. The kind of girl men overlooked until they needed kindness. But that night changed everything. When Lily stepped into the glittering ballroom, the world seemed to stop. Gone was the shy, invisible friend he barely noticed. In her place stood a vision, graceful, radiant, breathtaking. The millionaire who thought he had seen it all suddenly couldn't breathe. And as the music swelled and curious eyes turned toward them, Adrian realized this was no longer about saving face. It was about to become the one night that would unravel every certainty he had about love and leave him questioning if he could ever let her go. The chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above the ballroom, each crystal shard throwing fractured light across the polished marble floor. Music floated on the air, a sophisticated blend of violins and hushed conversation, while servers glided between the guests with trays of champagne and jewel-toned hors d'oeuvres. This was the kind of night Adrian Cole was known for, an evening where power disguised itself as elegance, and every smile hid ambition. It should have been flawless. But instead, Adrian stood near the grand staircase, his jaw tight, his phone clutched in his hand like it had just betrayed him. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing at the glowing screen. Another text, another excuse. His date, one of the city's most talked-about models, had canceled on him less than an hour before the gala. Stomach flu, she claimed. He didn't believe it. More likely, she'd found a better offer for the night. It wasn't about affection. He didn't care about her. He cared about what she represented. Status, image, the untouchable polish that the press expected of Adrian Cole. A man like him, with his fortune, his power, couldn't be seen without someone dazzling on his arm. Appearances were currency, and tonight he was bankrupt. Adrian, a soft but insistent voice interrupted. He turned to see his younger sister, Evelyn, approaching with a disapproving frown. She was the only person who dared to scold him, as if he were still the boy sneaking cigarettes behind their father's shed. Her golden hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had married into old money and never had to doubt her place. "What?" he asked sharply, slipping his phone into his pocket. "You're sulking," she accused. "And worse, you're alone. You can't walk in there without a date. The board members will circle like vultures, and the press will tear you apart tomorrow. They'll say the Cole heir couldn't even find a woman willing to spend an evening with him." Adrian exhaled, his irritation simmering beneath the surface. "Thank you, Evelyn, for your endless supply of optimism. Do you have a solution in that sharp little mind of yours, or are you just here to narrate my downfall?" She smirked, unbothered by his sarcasm. "Actually, I do have a solution. Lily." Adrian blinked. "Who the hell is Lily?" "My friend. The one I brought with me tonight," Evelyn explained, glancing over her shoulder toward the far end of the room. "You've met her before, though I doubt you remember. She's sweet, polite, perfectly capable of playing the part of your companion for one evening. No one needs to know, she's just my friend. To the rest of them, She'll be whoever you say she is." Adrian let out a humorless laugh. "You expect me to stroll into a room of billionaires and investors with some random friend of yours on my arm? This isn't a charity raffle, Evelyn. This is business." His sister's expression hardened. "It's either that, or you walk in there alone. Which do you prefer?" He clenched his jaw, his pride bristling at the idea. He hated being cornered, hated having no choice. And yet, Evelyn was right. Alone, he would look vulnerable, weak. His rivals would savor every second. He could not afford that. "Fine," he said at last, his tone clipped. "But don't expect me to entertain her beyond the bare minimum. I'll smile for the cameras. I'll keep her on my arm. And then this will be forgotten by morning. That's all I ask," Evelyn replied with a sly smile. "Wait here. I'll fetch her." Adrian tugged at the cuff of his tailored jacket, adjusting it as if the crisp lines could somehow restore control over the situation. He hated this, the unpredictability, the compromise. He had built his life on discipline, on ruthless order, and tonight that order had been shattered by a canceled text and his sister's meddling. He reminded himself this was just a temporary fix, nothing more. And then he saw her. Lily Bennett descended the staircase with hesitant grace, her hand brushing the railing as if to steady herself. She wasn't dressed like the others. While the room glittered with sequins and diamonds, Lily wore a simple gown of soft midnight blue that clung to her form without ostentation. Her dark hair, usually tucked back in a no-nonsense ponytail, had been coaxed into loose waves that framed her face. She had no jewels, no designer clutch, no pretense. But as she reached the bottom step, every conversation seemed to falter, every head to turn. Adrian's breath caught. He wasn't prepared for this. He remembered her now, in fragments. She had been around their house when they were teenagers, visiting Evelyn. A quiet girl who always kept her nose in a book, ink smudges on her fingers, laughter that was soft but genuine. Back then, he had dismissed her as background noise, someone too plain to notice in a world that thrived on spectacle. But tonight she was transformed, not because of the dress or her hair, but because of something else, something in her eyes. They held a light that the chandeliers couldn't replicate, a quiet fire that made him forget, just for a moment, how to breathe. "Adrian," Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts, smug amusement in her tone. "This is Lily. Lily, my insufferable brother. Please, save me from his bad mood." Lily smiled nervously, her hands twisting together for a moment before she extended one toward him. "It's nice to meet you again, Mr. Cole." Her voice, soft, steady, unpretentious. It struck him harder than it should have. "Adrian," he corrected automatically, taking her hand. It was warm, delicate grounding. He released it quickly, as if it had burned him. "Shall we?" he asked curtly, offering his arm. She hesitated, just a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze, before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. Together, they walked into the ballroom, the sea of onlookers parting like the Red Sea. Cameras flashed. Murmurs rose. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who is she? She's beautiful. Not his usual type, is she? Adrian ignored them, his expression carefully schooled into indifference. But inside, a storm was brewing. He was supposed to feel nothing. This was supposed to be transactional, convenient. Instead, every step with Lily at his side felt dangerously real. The evening unfolded in a blur of introductions and champagne. Adrian played his part, confident and charming, while Lily stayed close, answering questions with quiet grace. At first, he expected her to flounder under the weight of scrutiny, but she didn't. She surprised him. When one of his rivals, a smug man with too much money and too little tact, leaned in with a sneer and said, "And where exactly did Adrian find you, dear?" Lily didn't wilt. She smiled politely and replied, "In the same place all decent people are found, somewhere beyond your imagination." Adrian nearly choked on his drink. The room chuckled, the rival flushed, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt something that wasn't anger, wasn't control, it was amusement. Genuine, unguarded amusement. Later, as the music swelled and couples drifted to the dance floor, Evelyn appeared once more, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Dance with her," she whispered to her brother. "I don't dance," Adrian muttered. "Then learn. Or are you afraid?" He hated being challenged. With a resigned sigh, he turned to Lily. "Would you?" he asked stiffly, offering his hand. Her lips curved into a small smile. "I'd love to." The moment their hands met, a current shot through him, unsettling and electric. As he guided her onto the dance floor, his body remembered movements he hadn't practiced in years. She was light in his arms, her steps hesitant at first, but quickly finding rhythm with his. The orchestra's violins swelled, and the world beyond the dance floor faded. Adrian found himself watching her, not the crowd. The way her lashes fluttered when she laughed softly at his misstep. The way her gaze lingered, not on his wealth, not on the flash of cameras, but on him. Just him. No one had ever looked at him like that before. Like he wasn't Adrian Cole, millionaire, but simply a man. Something dangerous stirred in his chest. A whisper he thought he'd silenced long ago. The possibility of wanting. The risk of feeling. As the dance ended, applause rippled faintly through the crowd, though Adrian hardly noticed. He released her hand reluctantly, his heart pounding with a foreign rhythm. This was supposed to be a night about saving face. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something he couldn't name. And as he let her off the floor, his thoughts tangled into a single, haunting question, one that would echo long after the lights dimmed. What if the one woman he never meant to notice was the only one he would never be able to forget? Morning peeled back the night like a silk curtain, and with it came the familiar ache behind Adrian's eyes, the warning bell that he'd allowed himself to feel too much the evening before. He stared at his reflection in the mirror of his penthouse bathroom. Razor-straight jawline, immaculate stubble, a mouth that defaulted to indifference. He looked exactly the same as he had yesterday, and yet nothing felt the same. A memory flickered, Lily's hand in his, weightless and warm, and he had to close his eyes to cut the current before it dragged him under. He turned on the tap, splashed cold water over his face, and braced his palms on the marble. Control. That was the only language that had ever saved him. When the house he grew up in filled with smashed glass and slamming doors. When his mother's perfume clung to men who weren't his father. When the night erupted in a shouting that bled through the walls. Control had been the raft he built piece by piece. Grades, awards, deals. Numbers never screamed. Money never lied. Love was a bonfire that promised warmth and delivered smoke in your lungs. His phone buzzed on the counter. "Evelyn, you alive? Also, don't kill me, but the blogs are already sniffing. Call me." He let the phone face down and exhaled through his nose. The night had been a performance. The problem was he believed it mid-scene. The way Lily had smiled at his clumsy step on the dance floor. The way she deflected Marcus Vance's sleazy jab with a line that made half the room smother a laugh. The way her eyes had sought his, curious but not hungry. It ought to have been easy to file her away as a temporary prop. It wasn't. He toweled off, dressed with mechanical precision, and headed for coffee. The floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the kitchen with pale winter light. The city stretched like a glittering circuit board, each car a pulse. He placed the cup on the counter and forced his mind into the grid. Schedule, board call at 9, quarterly projections. The new philanthropic initiative the PR team had begged him to announce this week. Another layer of polish to keep the investors docile. He could bury last night in tasks if he moved fast enough. Except her laugh, soft as a secret, rose again. No. Control. A second text from Evelyn landed. Also, Lily left her scarf in the car. Navy. Smells like soap and paper. Don't be a robot. Bring it by. He stared at the message longer than he wanted to admit, then slid the scarf from the back of a bar stool where he dumped it after the driver handed it over. Navy wool need him. He lifted it, and the faintest scent found him. Clean, unperfumed, something like old books carried through fresh air. He set it down as if it could burn. An hour later, in a classroom that smelled of crayons and whiteboard markers, Lily Bennett was coaxing a minor miracle out of 27 restless fifth graders. On the board, she'd drawn a ridiculous dragon wearing spectacles and a bow tie. If Sir Bowtie always lies and Lady Spectacles always tells the truth, she said, and they give you two different answers to the same question, which one are you going to believe? Lady Spectacles, a chorus rang out. Okay, but what if Lady Spectacles is tired and Sir Bowtie sounds really convincing? She pressed, fighting a smile. How do you check? A small boy with an earnest frown raised his hand. Ask another question. Yes, she said, pleased warmth blooming in her chest. Ask another question. Don't just believe the loudest voice. Lily loved this. Not the noise, not the chaos, but the moment a face lit from inside because something that didn't make sense suddenly did. Teaching wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay enough. It left ink on her fingers and stacks of papers on her kitchen table, but made hard days survivable and soft days bright. In a life that had required her to be quiet so others could be louder, it let her be useful. Her phone buzzed in the desk drawer during lunch. A text from Evelyn. Are you recovering from last night? You were magic. Also, my brother is hopeless and owes you a thank you. Don't argue. Also, he's bringing your scarf. Lily blinked, heartbeat ticking up a notch. She'd woken with the kind of embarrassment that comes after you step into a world that isn't yours and somehow survive. The gala had sparkled like a snow globe shaken by a bored god. She'd made it through on nerves, a steady smile, and the stubborn refusal to let a man like Marcus make her small. The only part that felt oddly clear was the dance. Adrian's hand steady at her back, his gaze steady on her, the kind of attention that unnerved and steadied all at once. Stop it, she told herself, sliding the phone away. He was an arrangement, a patch for his pride. Whatever he'd felt had been for the cameras and the crowd. Still, another thought nudged in, soft as the scarf's wool. Even if it had been pretend, he'd defended her. And he hadn't had to. By mid-afternoon, the sky bruised with impending snow. Lily dismissed her students, waved to parents, and stayed late to stack books, tidy desks, and write notes to two kids who had tried so hard on their essays she wanted to bottle that effort and pour it back on their worst days. She tucked her hair behind her ear, tugged her cardigan close, and turned off the fluorescent lights. The classroom slid into quiet. When she stepped into the hallway, he was there. Adrian Cole in a charcoal coat, hands in his pockets, leaning against a bulletin board decorated with construction paper stars. He didn't belong against a backdrop of glitter glue and crooked letters, and yet the sight anchored something that had been drifting since the night before. I believe this is yours, he said, offering the navy scarf. The light from the door cut across his face, catching the sharp line of his cheekbone and the colder line of his mouth. Thank you, Lily said softly, accepting the scarf. Their fingers brushed, a spark then space. You didn't have to come all the way here. I was nearby, he lied. Or maybe he'd made himself nearby. And my sister is relentless. She is, Lily agreed, fighting a grin. An awkward silence stretched, then loosened when she asked, How are you after last night? His mouth tilted, not quite a smile. Recovering from an overdose of small talk and expensive air. She laughed, surprised and delighted by the line. That sounds right. He glanced down the hall at a mural of handprints shaped into a heart. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes, like a shadow crossing a window. You were good, he said. Better than good. At what? Not spilling on the mayor? I came close, she teased, then sobered. Thank you. For everything. Especially when you're friend. Rival, he corrected sharply, a flash of steel in his voice. Marcus Vance isn't my friend. Right, she said, seeing the vehemence and cataloging it with care. Thank you for stepping in. He looked like the thanks slid over him and couldn't quite stick. No one should talk to you like that. People talk to me like that all the time, she said, then felt the absurdity of the confession and tried to soften it. It's fine. I have practice. He studied her. I don't like that you have practice. Silence settled again, this time not uncomfortable. The hallway wasn't warm, but the air between them was. He shifted, as if the weight of what wasn't being said required a different balance, then asked, Can I take you for coffee? If you were in Lily's shoes, would you go get that coffee with him? Knowing the world he lives and could swallow yours? Tell me in the comments what your heart would do and why. She watched him for a beat longer. The careful posture, the calculation in his eyes, and beneath it, a flicker of something unarmored. He'd likely expected her to say yes quickly. Men like him were used to quick yes. I have papers to grade, she said, because the practical thing could be a shield. Bring them, he said. I'll supply caffeine and silence. A laugh escaped her. You're terrible at silence. He surprised himself by smiling, really smiling, a brief, unguarded shift that softened his whole face. I can learn. They walked to the small cafe around the corner where the barista knew her name and wrote it on a paper cup with a heart for a dot on the I. Adrian looked absurd in a place where the chairs didn't match, and the playlist was a rotation of melancholy acoustic covers. He ordered something black and unsweetened. She ordered a latte with cinnamon, and he paid with a card that probably made the register blush. They tucked into a back table. She pulled out her stack of papers. He wrapped long fingers around his cup and seemed almost unsure of what to do with the quiet. You really do this after school? He asked, eyeing the essays like a puzzle. I grade a little here, so I don't fall asleep on them at home, she said. Also, if I stay, parents assume I'm available for meetings until midnight. Boundaries, he murmured. Working on them, she admitted. You? Never learned the word, he said, and startled them both by adding, softly, or I learned it too well. She tilted her head. Is that a riddle? More of a bad autobiography, he said, gaze dropping to the table. I grew up in a house where lines were drawn like knives. You learn not to need, not to ask. She didn't move, didn't flood the space with sympathy or questions. She sat with him instead, letting the quiet be permission rather than pressure. He hadn't meant to say any of it, and yet the sentence hung there, and in it was a boy listening for the sound of the key in a lock and bracing for which version of night would come through the door. My mother, he said, tasting the disclosure like metal. She wasn't kind. She liked attention the way some people like air. My father loved her like it could fix something. It didn't. He huffed a breath that wasn't a laugh. Love is a poor locksmith. Lily traced the coffee sleeve with her thumb. Sometimes the wrong people teach us the right lessons, she said. Boundaries, self-respect, what we won't be. And sometimes they teach us to put out fires before we ever feel the heat, he countered, softer. Control keeps you from burning. It also keeps you from standing close to anything warm. She looked up then, and whatever he saw in her eyes made him feel both known and wary. So you build a life you could manage, she said. Rooms full of expensive air, ornate locks, doors that opened only one way. The corner of his mouth twitched. You should teach analysis to adults. She smiled. I teach it to 10-year-olds. They're brutal in the best way. He sat back. I don't talk about this. You don't have to, she said, and meant it. You don't owe me an explanation. He studied her face. No calculation. No angle. Relief moved through him like warm water over stone. Maybe I don't owe you one, he said slowly, but maybe you want to give you one. She swallowed, some small tender place inside her answering. Why me? His answer hovered and didn't land. He could say the safe thing, that she'd been useful last night, but the truth pressed insistently. Because you look at me like I'm not a headline, he said at last. And I don't know what to do with that. She held his gaze. Maybe you don't have to do anything with it, she said. Maybe you can just be looked at and see what that feels like. A muscle in his jaw eased. He didn't realize he'd been clenching it. They spoke of smaller things then, because you can only stand under a waterfall for so long. She told him about a student who'd started a book club called Dragons and Snacks. He told her in a tone that tried for bored and missed that he'd launched a fund that renovated public school libraries. Anonymous, because credit felt sticky. She nearly dropped her pen. That was you. He shrugged. It was a team. You could have told everyone, she said. It would help your image. He met her eyes. I'm not trying to fix an image with books. I'm trying to fix memories with them. She understood more than he said. Her own childhood had been gentle in ways money couldn't make and hard in ways it couldn't fix. Mother working double shifts, a father who loved quietly and died too early, a girl learning to stitch holes with patience and doing without the rest. If she had a secret, it was this. She wanted to be seen without having to perform brightness to earn it. The cafe clock slid toward 4. Snow began to lace the window in delicate lines. Adrian's phone vibrated incessantly. He let it. She finished a paragraph and made a note that read, You had something brave to say. Try again. I believe you can. He watched her write it and thought, no one ever wrote that on me. Outside, the city inhaled winter. He walked her to the corner because it felt right, not because the script demanded it. They stood under a streetlight that had clicked on early against the gray. Thank you for the coffee, she said, scarf tucked at her throat again. Thank you for the rest of it, he returned. She hesitated, then asked with an earnestness that disarmed him. What do you want, Adrian? Not today. In general. The question was a door he hadn't opened in years. Money had been an answer so loud it covered the question. He could say peace. He could say another deal. He could say nothing. Instead, he heard his own voice say, I want proof that what broke my parents isn't the only ending. Wind moved around them. She smiled then, a small, luminous thing that felt like someone turning on a lamp in a room you didn't realize was dark. Then you're not as far from it as you think. He wanted to ask how she knew. He wanted to ask if she ever wanted that proof for herself. He wanted to ask her what she'd feared last night, walking into a ballroom where everyone owned more mirrors than books. Instead, he said gently, Let me drive you home. She waited. Safety and risk. Curiosity and caution. All right, she said, because her instincts, those careful, stubborn creatures, didn't rise to warn her. His driver pulled up. The car interior smelled of leather and cedar. City lights stuttered across the windows as they moved. She gave directions. He listened and didn't comment on the neighborhood, where the bricks were older and the sidewalks knew everyone's first name. When they reached her building, he walked her to the stoop. She turned at the door. You can text your sister that I survived. I think you did more than survive, he said. Then, because he didn't know how to be brave in big ways yet, he chose a small one. Can I see you again? A beat. 2. She wasn't going to make this easy, and something in him was grateful. Why? He let the silence do the hard part. Because I want to learn the difference between expensive air and real air, he said. And I think you know. She nodded once, as if that answer had unlocked something specific. Okay, but I have rules. I'm listening. No galas for a while, she said. No pretending. No appearances for your board. If you want company, it has to be company, not cover. His mouth curved. Deal. And if you start treating me like a prop, she added, I walk. Don't, he said quietly, and surprised himself with the plea in it. Please. Her eyes softened. Text me, she said, stepping inside. I'll send you the schedule for dragons and snacks. He laughed. I fought hedge fund sharks, and I'm terrified of that club. They can smell fear, she warned, and closed the door with a smile that he carried down the steps like heat in his hands. He sat in the car, and I didn't tell the driver where to go. Snow flecked the windshield. He thought of a boy at a dinner table, while voices upstairs knifed the air, the way he'd counted seconds until the fight ended and taught himself never to need what could be used against him. He also thought of a woman under a streetlight asking what he wanted and not shrinking when the answer reached for something tender. By the time he reached his penthouse, the city was honest with winter. He shrugged off his coat, ignored the blinking red light on the landline that only very old men and the very powerful still used, poured a glass of water he didn't drink, and stood at the window. His phone buzzed. Evelyn again. Well, he typed. She's not what I expected. Then, because he wasn't planning to say the next part, and said it anyway. That might be the point. He set the phone down. It buzzed again. He didn't look. He let the quiet expand until it held him without squeezing. Across town, Lily sat on her couch with papers spread like a paper ocean and the scarf pooled in her lap. She thought of how he had listened, which was not the same as waiting to speak. She thought of his answer to her question. She thought of the way he held himself like a structure built after a storm. Her phone lit. Adrian, I'd like to donate a set of books to Dragons and Snacks. Do they accept bribes? Lily, only if you join a meeting and defend your choices. They will cross-examine you. Adrian, name the time. I will arrive with pastries and hubris. Lily, pastries are more effective. Adrian, duly noted. She smiled into the quiet, then sobered when she found a flyer half-tucked beneath the couch cushion. Past due, it read, in unfriendly ink. Her rent had slipped a cycle because she'd paid for extra supplies and kept the heat higher for an elderly neighbor whose radiator rattled more than it warmed. She folded the notice and placed it on the coffee table like setting down a stone. There are always stones. You learn to carry them without letting them harden you. She texted Evelyn, thank you for last night and for believing I wouldn't faint, and got a string of heart emojis and a voice memo in return that said, don't hate me later. Hate you later for what? She murmured to no one, then shook her head. She had papers to grade and a dragon to draw for tomorrow's logic puzzle. Somewhere under the same sky, a headline was being drafted by someone who knew how to turn a 3-minute observation into a 24-hour storm. The photo would be flattering. The caption would not. In the morning, the world would sharpen its teeth. But tonight, a man who had taught himself that warmth meant danger stood at a window and didn't flinch from the way it felt to want. And a woman who had taught herself to be small, to fit other people's comfort, let the scarf at her throat remind her that she had stepped into a room built to make her disappear and hadn't. Quick pulse check for you watching. Have you ever met someone who made you question a rule you wrote to protect yourself? Drop your story below. Your words might be the nudge someone else needs tonight. The morning paper hit the marble floor of Adrian's penthouse with a thud. He hadn't ordered it, he never did, but his staff left it on his doorstep out of habit. He ignored it first, scrolling through financial reports, sipping coffee black enough to scrape his throat raw. Then his phone buzzed. Evelyn. Again. Don't be mad. Just check page 3. He frowned, reached for the paper, and unfolded it with the suspicion of a man defusing a bomb. And there it was. A photograph stretched across half the page. Adrian Cole, notorious millionaire, guiding a dark-haired woman across the ballroom floor, her gown simple but luminous under the chandeliers. His head was bent toward hers, his hand firm at her waist. The caption read, Adrian Cole's mystery woman. Who is she? His pulse spiked. He skimmed the article. Speculation. Gossip. Words like unknown, unlikely, ordinary, tossed around with knives disguised as curiosity. They had already dug for her name. They had already whispered about her plain job, her modest background. And of course, because the press never resisted, someone had hinted at gold digger. Adrian slammed the paper shut, jaw locked. He hated when the press fed on blood, but this felt different. It wasn't just his blood this time. It was hers. At the same hour, Lily sat at her kitchen table, toast forgotten, staring at her buzzing phone. Her inbox overflowed with messages she hadn't asked for. Colleagues forwarding articles, Evelyn apologizing in rapid texts, strangers on social media commenting on her looks, her clothes, her worth. Some were cruel in that way only anonymous mouths could be. Some were worse, oddly worshipful, the kind that stripped her into a symbol instead of a person. Her hands shook as she locked the phone and shoved it aside. She'd lived her whole life unnoticed, invisible by choice and circumstance. Now, overnight, the world was staring, and not kindly. The knock at her door nearly made her jump. She opened it to find Adrian, tall and furious, holding the same newspaper she'd just tried to outrun. They're vultures, he said without greeting. His tone cut, sharp as glass. Say the word, and I'll bury this. She blinked, gathering herself. Bury it how? With money. Yes, he said bluntly. With money, influence, lawyers. It doesn't matter how. It matters that it stops. Her stomach twisted. You think you can erase this? It's already out. People already believe what they want. His eyes flicked over her, searching for cracks. She was pale, shaken, but there was steel in her spine. I should have seen this coming, he muttered, more to himself than her. I should have known they'd come for you. Her throat tightened. Because I'm easy to attack. Because you're real, he snapped, stepping closer. They don't know what to do with real. The word caught her off guard, but she pushed back. I don't want to be part of your headlines, Adrian. I didn't ask for this. No, he admitted, softer now. But I did. By pulling you into that room. By asking you to stand next to me. His jaw worked. And I'd do it again. Her breath hitched. He was too close. His presence a storm she wasn't sure she could withstand. The following night, Evelyn insisted on dinner at her townhouse, a buffer from the chaos. Lily arrived with cautious steps, nerves still frayed. Adrian was already there, brooding over a glass of wine. Evelyn breezed into the dining room, all charm. You two look like you're planning a coup, not dinner. She set down the roasted chicken, her smile tight. Relax. It'll blow over. Blow over. Adrian barked. They've turned her into a spectacle. Lily touched the edge of her glass, steadying herself. He's right. People are staring at me like I don't belong anywhere. I don't know how to breathe in this world. Adrian's gaze snapped to her. He saw the tremor she tried to hide, the exhaustion beneath her eyes. Something protective flared in him, visceral and undeniable. You don't have to belong in their world, he said. You just have to belong in yours. The table fell quiet. Evelyn arched a brow, but wisely said nothing. Later, as Adrian drove Lily home, snow feathered the windshield. She sat silent, her hands folded in her lap, the city lights casting fleeting shadows across her face. Finally, she whispered, Why did you defend me? He glanced at her, startled. Because you deserve defending. That's not what I mean. She turned to him, eyes searching. Men like you don't risk their image for women like me. So why? He gripped the wheel tighter. Memories threatened. His mother's cruel laughter, his father's hollow eyes, the vow he'd made never to want what could betray him. But Lily's question pierced that armor. Because I couldn't not, he said hoarsely. And that terrifies me. Her breath caught, her pulse racing. She wanted to press, to ask what he was so afraid of. But the truth hung thick between them, fragile and unfinished. As he pulled up to her building, he looked at her like a man on the edge of something he swore he'd never need. "Lily," he murmured, her name tasting dangerous in his mouth. But before he could say more, a camera flash exploded across the street. Paparazzi. The next morning, Lily tried to pretend life could still be ordinary. She slipped into her classroom early, arranging papers, straightening chairs, and drawing another silly dragon on the board to coax her students into laughter. But her phone buzzed with reminders of reality. Co-workers sending awkward hang-in-there texts, her principal asking for a quick chat, strangers posting under her picture as if she were public property. She turned the phone face down and forced a smile when the first students ran in. But smiles could only hold so long. At lunch, the principal closed the office door and folded her hands on the desk. "Lily, you're a wonderful teacher. But the attention you're receiving, it's becoming a distraction. Parents are concerned about the cameras outside. Some feel your involvement with Mr. Cole may reflect." "Reflect what?" Lily interrupted, her cheeks burning. "That I danced once at a gala? That I exist in a photograph?" The principal sighed. "It's complicated. Just be careful. Be careful." As if she'd chosen this. As if her quiet life had invited the storm. Meanwhile, Adrian was on the 40th floor of his glass tower, staring at his reflection in the window as his assistant rattled off numbers. He wasn't listening. He could still see the flinch in Lily's eyes when the paparazzi's flash had exploded outside her apartment. The way she'd ducked her head, like prey sensing claws above. He slammed his pen down. "Cancel the rest of my morning." "Mr. Cole." "Cancel it," he repeated. His tone brooked no debate. That evening, Adrian arrived outside Lily's building with his black car, idling like a shadow. She stepped out, startled, her scarf tugged tight around her throat. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "The cameras. Let them watch," he cut in. His voice was low, steady, but something burned in it. "I don't care what they say about me. I care what they're doing to you." Her chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this, Adrian. I didn't ask for you." His jaw flexed. "And yet here we are." Silence hummed, the street lamps buzzing overhead. Finally, he opened the door. "Get in, please." Against her better judgment, she slid into the leather seat. The car pulled away, city lights streaking across the windows like fireflies. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quieter," he said simply. They drove to the river, where the city's roar softened into water lapping against stone. Adrian led her along the pier, their breath clouding in the cold. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "I grew up watching love destroy people. My father, he gave everything to a woman who burned it all down. I swore I'd never make that mistake." Lily looked at him, her heart softening despite herself. "And yet you keep defending me." He met her gaze, raw honesty flickering through. "Because every time I see you, I can't remember why I swore it." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the heat of his words. But fear gnawed at her. "You don't know me, Adrian. You only know what you've projected onto me. I'm not one of your polished women who fits into your world." "Good," he said sharply. "Because my world is poison, Lily. And you're the first thing in years that doesn't taste like ashes." The confession left them both shaken. The days that followed pulled them into an uneasy rhythm. Adrian insisted on driving her home after school, shielding her from the cameras. He showed up with takeout containers when she worked late on lesson plans. He even walked into her classroom once, donating books under the pretense of business, but staying long enough to charm a room of 10-year-olds who demanded he read aloud. Watching him, Lily saw glimpses of the man buried beneath the millionaire mask, a man capable of gentleness, humor, and maybe even love. But the world didn't make it easy. Paparazzi hounded them. Gossip blogs posted cruel headlines. Plain Jane snags the millionaire. Cinderella or gold digger. Each time, Lily's stomach knotted tighter. Then came the ex. Veronica Vale, swept into a charity event in diamonds sharp enough to cut glass. She draped herself against Adrian as if Lily weren't standing right there. "Darling," she purred, "you must be exhausted playing house with schoolteachers. Don't worry, he'll grow bored." Lily froze, humiliation burning her cheeks. Adrian stiffened, his arm tightening protectively around her. "Veronica," he said coldly, "leave." But the damage was done. Lily's heart twisted. She whispered an excuse and slipped outside, the winter air biting her skin. Adrian followed, fury in his eyes. "Don't listen to her," he said, reaching for her hand. Lily pulled back. "Is she wrong, Adrian? Am I just a distraction until you move on?" His chest heaved, words tangled in his throat. He wanted to promise forever, but the weight of his past pressed like chains. "You're not a distraction," he said finally. "You're the only thing that feels real." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "Then prove it, because right now, all I see is a world built to crush me." She turned away, leaving him standing in the cold, his breath fogging the air as he realized the truth. Protecting her from the world wasn't enough. He had to protect her from himself, too. If you were Lily, would you believe Adrian's words, or would you walk away before you got hurt? Let me know in the comments below. The storm broke on a Thursday. Lily had just dismissed her class, stacking essays into neat piles when the first text came in. "Is it true?" She frowned, not recognizing the number. Before she could answer, another came, then another. Her phone buzzed like a hive until she silenced it and shoved it into her drawer. But the whispers followed her. Teachers in the hallway glanced her way and quickly looked back at their papers. Parents outside clutched their coats tighter, their voices pitched low as they waited for their children. By the time she stepped outside, reporters had gathered like wolves. Lily Bennett, did you know you were just a cover date? Was it worth it? Pretending for a millionaire's image? Are you in love with him? Or is this just about money?" Her heart stumbled in her chest. She shoved through the crowd, her scarf pulled high around her face, but the words lodged like glass splinters. Pretending. Cover date. She reached her apartment, slammed the door shut, and pressed her back against it. The apartment seemed too small to hold her panic. With trembling hands, she pulled her phone free and tapped the first headline. Adrian Cole's gala mystery. Insider claims date was a last-minute hire. The article was brutal. An anonymous source claimed Adrian had been abandoned by his model date and had plucked Evelyn's plain little friend from obscurity to save face. It detailed everything: his desperation, her mediocrity, the convenient illusion they had sold the room. Her stomach turned to stone. Meanwhile, in his tower of steel and glass, Adrian's phone erupted with calls. His PR director was pale. "It's spreading everywhere. Vance's people are behind it. I'd bet my career. We can smother some, but the seed's planted. The public thinks Lily was just a stand-in. A prop." Adrian's hand clenched into a fist. Marcus Vance. Of course. This had his rival's fingerprints all over it. "Gimme Vance," he growled. But it was too late. The damage had been done, not to his reputation. He didn't care about that, but to hers. He left the office without another word, ignoring every assistant who scrambled after him. Lily was on her couch when the knock came. She almost didn't open the door. But when she did, Adrian stood there, tall and furious, the city's winter clinging to his coat. "I should have warned you," he said, voice rough. "Vance did this. He wanted to humiliate you, to humiliate me. You don't need to explain," she cut him off. Her voice trembled. but her chin was high. "It's true, isn't it? You only took me because you had no one else. I was just convenient." His throat tightened. "Yes," he admitted, because he had promised himself he wouldn't lie to her. "At first, you were never supposed to matter." The words hung like smoke between them. Lily's breath hitched, as if he had struck her. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "And yet now I'm the one paying for it. They're tearing me apart, Adrian. My job, my students, my name, it's all collapsing because I let you pull me into your world." He stepped closer, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean for this. I didn't mean for you." She faced him then, tears burning her eyes. "What am I to you, Adrian? A mistake you can't undo? Or something you'll get bored of once the gossip shifts?" His chest heaved. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat into control, into silence. But he forced the truth out, raw and unpolished. "You're not a mistake. You're the only thing that's ever felt like more than survival. And I'm terrified because I don't know how to hold something real without breaking it." Her tears slipped free. She wanted to believe him, wanted to reach for him, but fear clawed at her ribs. "Then maybe you shouldn't hold me at all." And she walked away, closing the door softly behind her. Adrian stood in the hallway, the weight of his past pressing down, his mother's betrayal, his father's hollow eyes, the vow he'd made to never need love. He had crushed every spark of tenderness in his life until now. And now, the one woman who had made him forget that vow had slipped from his hands. That night, alone in her apartment, Lily buried her face in her pillow and let herself cry. She cried for the girl who had once been invisible, who had dreamed of being seen. She cried for the woman who had dared to step into a glittering ballroom and believe she could belong. And most of all, she cried for the part of her heart that had started to trust Adrian Cole, only to be shattered by the truth. Snow fell heavy that week, muffling the city in white silence. To Lily, it felt less like beauty and more like suffocation. Every corner of her life had been cracked open by the gossip. Parents began to whisper in the school parking lot. Colleagues offered stiff smiles edged with judgment. And when her principal called her into the office on Friday, Lily already knew what was coming. "We value you, Miss Bennett," the principal said gently, "but the distraction has become too disruptive. Until this blows over, we think it best you take a leave of absence." Leave of absence. It sounded polite. It felt like exile. Lily left the building with her box of supplies cradled in her arms, her heart breaking. She had given herself fully to her students, her classroom, her quiet life, and in 1 week it had been taken. All because she'd let herself stand in a room beside Adrian Cole. That night, her apartment felt colder than ever. She sat on her couch, staring at the stack of graded essays, the neat handwriting of her students asking silly questions in the margins. "Miss Bennett, do dragons eat cake? Miss Bennett, did you ever fall in love?" She pressed the papers to her chest, her tears hot and bitter. Across town, Adrian was unraveling. The press conferences bored him. The deals piled on his desk meant nothing. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole couldn't focus. His assistant found him staring at the skyline, whiskey untouched at his elbow, eyes hollow. "Mr. Cole, the investors." "Cancel them," Adrian muttered. "But sir, cancel everything," he snapped, the fury in his voice a thin cover for the emptiness underneath. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face as she whispered, "Then maybe you shouldn't hold me at all." He remembered his father's broken gaze, the man hollowed out by love betrayed. Adrian had sworn never to let love weaken him. And yet, Lily's absence had gutted him in a way money, power, and reputation never could. Marcus Vance smelled blood. He cornered Adrian at a board meeting, smirking. "Heard your schoolteacher quit. Shame. Not everyone's built for the spotlight, eh?" You should have stuck with women who know the rules of the game. Adrian's fists curled under the table. Once he would have laughed it off, but the thought of Marcus saying Lily's name with that sneer ignited something primal. He left the meeting without a word, rage clawing his throat. Days passed. Lily avoided Evelyn's calls, avoided the news, avoided the mirror. She worked odd shifts at a bookstore to cover rent, grateful for the quiet stacks of novels that didn't ask questions. But at night, loneliness pressed him like a weight. She had wanted to believe Adrian when he said she wasn't a mistake, but believing him had cost her everything. One evening, a letter slipped under her door. Handwritten, sharp strokes of ink on heavy paper. Lily, I never learned how to love without breaking it, but I want to try. You are not a mistake. You are the only thing I don't want to let go. Adrian. Her fingers trembled as she read it, tears blurring the words. But fear still whispered. What if he meant it now, but not tomorrow? What if his world devoured her again? She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her journal. For now, it wasn't enough. Adrian sat alone in his penthouse. Lights dimmed, the city spread below like a cold ocean. He had everything, and yet he felt stripped bare. His father's words echoed in memory. Love is weakness, son. Don't let it ruin you the way it ruined me. But for the first time, Adrian wondered if the real weakness was running from it. Lily, curled on her couch with her scarf wrapped tight, whispered into the empty air, "Why does it hurt so much to be seen?" And for the first time in years, both of them, two people from worlds that should never have touched, felt utterly alone. Have you ever walked away from someone because you were too afraid to believe their love was real? Did you regret it later? Share your story in the comments. The bookstore smelled of paper and dust, the kind of place that kept time differently from the rest of the city. Lily had taken the late shift to avoid the endless questions, the flashing cameras, the pitying looks. Here, among the shelves, she could disappear again. That was safer. She sat behind the counter, pen in hand, writing notes in the margins of a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Not for herself, but for her students who no longer filled her days. See how Elizabeth refuses to settle? You can too. She smiled faintly at the thought of sliding the book into a backpack, of bright eyes widening when they found her note. The smile faded when she remembered. There was no classroom waiting for her anymore. The bell above the door chimed. She glanced up automatically, ready to greet a customer, and froze. Adrian Cole filled the doorway, snowflakes clinging to the shoulders of his coat, his jaw tight as if he'd fought a war on the way here. The store was nearly empty. Only one old man browsed the travel section. The rest of the world fell away. Adrian, she whispered, her pulse racing. You shouldn't be here. Then fire me, he said, voice low but steady. But I'm not leaving until I say this. She rose slowly, her fingers gripping the counter. Don't do this here. Where else? He asked, stepping closer. You've shut every other door. Her chest ached. What do you want? He hesitated, then dropped the shield he'd worn his whole life. His words came raw, uncalculated. I want you. I want to stop pretending I don't. I built my empire, so I'd never need anyone. But every day without you feels like it's crumbling. And I don't care if the world calls me weak. If being with you is weakness, then I'll take it. Her eyes stung. She wanted to believe him, but the scars from the headlines, the whispers, her lost job, were still fresh. And what happens when you get bored? When someone else fits better in your world? His throat worked, emotion breaking through his polished armor. Then I'll tear my world down until it fits you. The old man in the travel section looked up, sensing the weight of the moment, then politely shuffled to the far end of the store. Lily's voice trembled. You don't know what you're asking. Loving me means losing control. It means risking everything. He stepped closer, his hand hovering but not touching her. Then teach me how, because I don't want control anymore. I want you." Her breath hitched. For so long she had lived small, unnoticed, safe. Adrian Cole was a storm, and storms could destroy. But storms could also change landscapes, carve rivers, bring life where there had been none. She swallowed hard. "One condition," she said, her voice barely steady. "Anything. No boardrooms. No galas. No headlines. If you want me, you find me here in the quiet. No masks." His chest rose and fell. Done. Something uncoiled in her chest, the faintest flicker of trust daring to rise again. He exhaled, as though he'd been holding his breath since the day she walked away. "Lily," he said softly, her name tasting like a vow. And in that moment, something shifted. Not the world outside. The gossip would rage, the cameras would flash, the rivals would sneer. But inside them, in that quiet bookstore, they had chosen each other. Later that night, Adrian sat in his penthouse, staring at the skyline. For the first time, the city didn't feel like his fortress. It felt like something he could lose, and something worth risking if it meant keeping her. And Lily lay awake, her scarf pulled close, whispering into the dark, "Please don't let this break me." Both of them knew the battle wasn't over. But for the first time, they had chosen to fight it together. The Winter Gala was supposed to be Marcus Vance's victory lap. He'd orchestrated the whispers, leaked the articles, and watched Lily Bennett's life crumble under the weight of his rumors. Tonight, with the city's elite gathered under chandeliers and champagne bubbles, he planned to finish the job. Paint Adrian Cole as a desperate man who had fallen for a plain nobody, and prove to everyone that Marcus was the sharper predator. Adrian knew it. That's why he walked into the ballroom with Lily on his arm. Not as a shield, not as an accessory, but as his choice. The cameras exploded with light, the air thick with gasps and speculation. Lily's fingers trembled against his sleeve, but she didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, grace carved out of quiet courage. Marcus pounced almost immediately, his voice carrying across the room like poison in crystal. Well, Adrian Cole and his schoolteacher. I must say, it's refreshing to see you slumming it with the common folk." Laughter rippled, sharp and cruel. Adrian turned, eyes blazing. "Careful, Marcus." But Marcus smirked, sensing his moment. "No need to be touchy. Everyone here knows what this is. A little performance to patch your pride. Tell me, Lily, did he pay you well to smile for the cameras? Or is it charity work?" The crowd gasped. Phones tilted higher. Every eye burned into Lily. She froze, shame threatening to choke her. The same humiliation she'd felt in the school hallway, in the whispers in the headlines, surged up again. And then Adrian stepped forward. "She's not a performance," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "She's not a cover, or a headline, or a mistake. She's the bravest woman in this room, and the only one who's ever looked at me and seen a man worth loving, not a millionaire to use." The ballroom fell silent. Marcus sneered. "You expect us to believe." "I don't care what you believe," Adrian cut in sharply. His hand found Lily's, threading their fingers together. "For years, I thought love was weakness. I built walls of steel and glass because I watched my father break under betrayal. I told myself I didn't need anyone. But then I met her, and now I know the truth. Love isn't weakness. Love is the only thing strong enough to tear those walls down." Lily's heart hammered her chest. He wasn't just defending her. He was laying himself bare in front of the world that had taught him to hide. Marcus scoffed. "Touching, but the world doesn't buy fairy tales." "Then let them choke on reality," Adrian snapped. He pulled Lily closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear the final vow. "I'd burn my empire down before I let them take you from me." And then, before anyone could twist another word, he kissed her. Not the polite kind of kiss staged for cameras, but fierce, desperate claiming. A kiss that told every rival, every reporter, every sneering guest that this wasn't an act. This was a man choosing the one woman who had broken through his fortress and found his heart. The ballroom erupted, some in shock, some in applause, some in scandalized whispers. But Adrian didn't hear them. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about the empire, the image, the gossip. All he cared about was the woman in his arms, kissing him back like she'd finally found the air she'd been searching for. When they broke apart, Lily whispered, breathless, "Do you know what you just done?" "Yes," Adrian said, eyes burning with conviction. "I've told the truth." The fallout was instant. Headlines exploded, investors demanded explanations, and Marcus raged at his lost power. But Adrian didn't waver. For once, he stood not as a businessman, but as a man in love. And Lily, though terrified of what tomorrow might bring, felt something stronger than fear. She felt chosen, seen, loved. The days after the gala were chaos. Newspapers spun the kiss into 1,000 stories. Cole declares love for schoolteacher. From chalkboard to chandelier. Lily Bennett's fairy tale. Love or lunacy. Adrian Cole defies empire for plain Jane. Investors stormed Adrian's offices, demanding answers. Marcus Vance gloated to anyone who would listen, convinced Adrian had finally lost his mind. But for the first time, Adrian didn't fight to control the narrative. He let the stories fly. He let the gossip burn. Because for once, the truth was stronger than their lies. Lily, however, wrestled with her own storm. She had spent weeks being ridiculed, doubted, cast out of the classroom she loved. She still woke up each morning bracing herself for headlines. And yet in the quiet moments when Adrian held her hand across a dinner table, when he showed up at her bookstore shift with coffee and no cameras, when he looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world, something inside her softened. One evening, he arrived at her apartment with no suit, no chauffeur, no entourage. Just Adrian, in a worn sweater, carrying a box. "What's this?" she asked, brows knitting. He set on her table. Inside were stacks of children's books, each with a small gold sticker on the spine, donated by the Lily Bennett Fund. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "Your students," he said quietly. "They deserve you. And you deserve a place to teach without fear. I've already spoken to the board. We're funding a new program in your name, literacy, arts, resources for teachers. You'll never have to choose between helping a child and paying your rent again." Tears blurred her vision. "Adrian, I'm not giving this to you because you need it," he said, stepping closer. "I'm giving it because I need it. Because for the first time in my life, I want to build something that matters. Not for image, not for power. For love. For you." Her tears slipped free, and she laughed through them. "You're ridiculous." Probably, he admitted. "But I'm ridiculous about you." And then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee. Lily gasped. "Adrian." He took her hand, his eyes raw and unguarded. "I spent my whole life believing love was a weakness. But you showed me it's the only strength worth having. I don't care about headlines. I don't care about empires. I care about you. Marry me. Not because the world is watching, but because I can't imagine a life where you're not at my side." Silence wrapped the room, broken only by the thud of her heart. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. "Yes, Adrian." He stood, pulling her into his arms, and kissed her with a promise that no newspaper could twist, no rival could taint. Months later, the city buzzed again, not with scandal, but with celebration. The headlines that once mocked her now read, "Adrian Cole marries the woman who changed everything." At the small ceremony, Evelyn beamed through tears. Children from Lily's school lined the aisle, holding books instead of flowers. Adrian stood tall, his hands steady in hers, his vows simple. "You are my proof. My choice. My forever. Lily's vows were quieter, but just as strong. You taught me that love can survive even in the harshest light. And I choose you again and again. They kissed beneath a shower of petals, not cameras. And for once, Adrian didn't feel like a man performing. He felt like a man finally home. In the weeks after, Lily's classroom reopened, brighter, fuller, alive with books and laughter. Adrian visited often, earning teasing nicknames from the children who adored him. And at night, when they curled together in their apartment, the city lights glowing outside, they knew the truth. They had both been broken by love before, Adrian by betrayal, Lily by invisibility. But together, they had built something unshakable. Not weakness, not scandal, love. Real, enduring, victorious. If you were in Lily's shoes, would you have said yes, trusting a man with such a broken past? Or would you have feared he could never truly change? Share your thoughts in the comments below.